Hi. Oh my goodness. We're back. We're back. For once in my life, I'm like home during the day. So, yeah, I'm back. We're gonna talk about some books finally. So today is March 4th. I fully intended in February to make a what I read in January video. And then we were just simply too far in February. So, yeah, I guess now I will do January and February together in the same video. What I read in January and February, slash what I read so far, because the last book I read in February, I technically finished yesterday on March 3rd. So it doesn't really count, but I'm gonna count it, you know? Yeah. Okay, so that's that. I have my notes with all the books that I read. Yeah, so there are 8 books, so let's get rolling. The first book that I read in January was Colleen Hoover, All Your Perfects. This was the only Colleen Hoover book I already had on my shelves that I had not yet read, so I figured I should just get it done. And honestly, it was pretty solid. Of all of the Coho books that I have read, this one is definitely the strongest in its writing and in how the story unfolds, and also in its depth. If you're in the book talk, booktube verse a lot, you've probably heard some of the critiques going around about some of her work and the themes that come up time and time again. But this book centers around infertility, which is a very real struggle. At this point in my life, I can only imagine what that's like, but I do think it's a very prominent and a very real issue that needs more discussion. And so along with the infertility, I think comes a lot of internal struggle within the character that is grappling with this, and so I appreciated that about this particular Colleen Hoover book. Compared to some of her other works, the struggle in the relationship was a little bit more internal and real and deep. Yeah. It did also make me cry in public. I was like eating a salad, reading, and like just like sobbing. So I definitely connected with the characters and their relationship. Okay, enough about that. The next book that I read was The Stand by Stephen King, which is a tome. It's a giant brick of a book. I read it on my Kobo because I read primarily on my commutes and or like when I'm out of the house, and so to lug around a book that big is not very fun. But I did read The Stand, and actually we have it on our shelves. Okay, I'm back. Here she is, little brick of a book. And this book, this version, and also the version that I read on my Kobo, is like a newer. So I think The Stand was like originally published in a version, and then in a later publication iteration of the book, King decided to add back in some of the original stuff that had been cut out. So then it became even longer than it already was. So that is the prolonged version is the version that I read. Let's see how many pages this thing actually is. Can you see that number? 1,153 pages. What I have to say about this book is that King is really, really good at character development across all of his books, but in this one especially, because this book is so long, and just like, I don't know, in light of the storyline, there is like a whole cast of quote-unquote main characters, if you will, and I think, in my opinion, to write like one solid main character is very difficult to write a whole cast of very solid main characters, all with their own background stories, all with their own like depth of characters. Like, so difficult, but he does it so well. So kudos to Stephen King for real. This book also made me cry while I was out in public, so there's that. The ending didn't really serve me, which is unfortunate because it's such a long book. But the writing throughout the entire book was so good, and yeah, Stephen King is just so good at his craft that I can't even be that mad about just the ending. The third book that I read in January was Going to Meet the Man. This is a short story collection by James Baldwin. This was my first James Baldwin. I definitely need to read more of him. But yeah, I will just say that the first two stories in this collection were mid, in my opinion, but all the rest of them were quite good, very strong. Yeah, and he touches on themes of racial dynamics and inequalities. Yeah, just like thematically very strong. The writing also quite strong. Again, through most of it. Yeah, so that's that. I'm also on a mission to read at least one nonfiction book every month, and so the first one that I read this year was Tracy Kidder's Strengthen What Remains. You might know the author from, it's the same author who wrote Mountains Beyond Mountains, which I know is talked about a little bit more widely years and years and years ago. But also I know like not a lot of people read nonfiction, unfortunately. But yeah, okay, anyways, this was such a compelling read. It's a really inspiring and heartbreaking story. It follows this man named Deo, and sort of captures his life experiences as he was forced, for the sake of survival, basically, to escape his home country of Burundi. That brought him to different places within Africa, and then eventually to New York City. And then it kind of also follows his like initial trips back home after he settles in the States and stuff. And yeah, just the way that Deo is portrayed in this, I want to meet him so bad. I want to be his friend. I care so deeply for him. Yeah, this book also sprinkles in bits and pieces of some of the history of Burundi and history of also Rwanda. And yeah, after reading this, I feel now like I want to do more research and learn more about both of those countries. Yeah, because I think reading is fun and reading is escape, and also reading is learning and analyzing and, you know, taking note of the world that we exist in. So yeah, so that's the last book that I read in January. Moving into February, I read the Mistborn trilogy, the Era 1 trilogy. So I have officially entered the Cosmere, and I'm a little bit overwhelmed because the Cosmere is so vast and there's so many books already out, and also so many books that are planned that are not going to be out for quite some time. And series have always been a little bit scary to me. Not scary, I just like, my thing is like I read a lot of books and I forget a lot of them quite quickly. So if I read a series, I want to read them back to back, so that I know like what all is happening. So that means that, one, I don't like to wait for books, and also two, like if a series is really long, like it's just hard to commit to that, because I also am someone who like needs variety sprinkled in, you know? So anyways, I committed to the first trilogy, and then I was like, we'll see. And it was good. I think of the 3 books, so the first one being The Final Empire, the second one, The Well of Ascension, the third one, The Hero of Ages. My favorite was the second book. I'm told that that is a controversial opinion, but I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I think overall, like, I really liked the magic system that Sanderson has developed in these books, and it's so well thought out. Like, I feel like if I were transported into this universe and I had these powers, if you will, I would already know how to use them because it's so well described. Like, it's so scientific almost in how it's described and worked out. I really loved the characters and the development of different relationships. Trust is a big theme, and trust is hard, so I relate to Vin, and I'm proud of her for learning how to trust, and she's just so cool. I think book 2 was my favorite because book 1 was like getting to know the characters, getting to know the world, and like the story that's unfolding. But then book 2, I feel like we got like a really, like a deeper dive into like who they are as humans, and I was like, I wanna be friends with y'all. Y'all are cool. Yeah, so I feel good about the series. I feel like perhaps I do need to continue forward on my journey in the Cosmere. I just don't know when that is going to happen. I'm just so impressed by Sanderson's ability to build a world, like really build a world without ever making it feel like a drag, if you will. I don't know, I think that sometimes with genre fiction, when there is a lot of complex world building, there are moments, especially in the beginning of a book or a beginning of a series especially, where I'm like, okay, this is world building, and I know this will be important later, but it's like a little bit dry, not super interesting. But there's none of that. There's none of that with Sanderson. I'm like invested in the characters from the get-go, and I think that is a very impressive feat. So yeah, that was 3 books. That was a trilogy. And the last book that I just read, that I just finished, Hood Feminism. This is a collection of essays that is chiefly about intersectionality within the feminist movement and why this intersectionality is so important, and how so many vulnerable and marginalized communities are so often left out of traditional feminist arguments. And yeah, I think it was a really strong read. For me personally, like I don't say this to like brag or whatever by any means, but my educational background is in the public health space, so we talk a lot about intersectionality, and we talk about things that she talks about in this book, like housing and food and education, and you know, all these things that on the surface level are not public health and or are not feminist, but if you really think about who these things are affecting, like absolutely they are. And so I think I just went in a little bit more aware. I also took a class in college called Cultural Competence and Humility, and in that class we talked all about intersectionalities and different isms and different aspects of our identities, and how privilege and oppression is like you can be privileged in one way and oppressed by so many other communities at the same time. None of it is mutually exclusive. Yeah, so reading this book kind of brought me back to that class and some of the things that we talked about. And so in that way, I don't think personally that I learned anything new necessarily in reading this book. And also, I did, however, still sticky tabs so many things, and so obviously still a very worthwhile read. She makes really compelling points, and her arguments stand so strong, and I just 100% I stand behind Mikki Kendall, and I would recommend that everyone read this book, especially if you consider yourself a feminist. Okay, so that's all the books that I've read so far. Yeah, I'll see you when I see you. Thank you for coming on this messy little journey with me. Yeah, there's a lot happening in the world, in the country, in the United States, and how lucky we are to have literature and to have books to help us reconnect with ourselves and find peace, maybe find joy in some instances, but also to help us learn and put things into context and like really look at the history that has led us to where we are now. I guess lastly, just like remember that you matter, and remember that you are so worthy, and remember that you belong here. So please stay, and love is so abundant. The world needs more love right now, always, but now more than ever. And yeah, just hold on tight to your compassion and hold on tight to your humanity, and continue to read books as you do all of that, because books are so special, and books are art, and art is so special.